once said in the Sermon on the Mount as he was wrapping it up, "Do not give to dogs what is sacred, or cast your pearls before swine, because otherwise they may trample them underfoot, and turning may devour you." This week in our scripture, we're starting into a passage where I think we get to see what that actually looks like. As Paul continues his defense and his self-protection, he steps before the machinery of the Roman government, in some ways, in a real way, for the first time. But before we go there, does it feel like we are beginning to be able to recognize the reality of post-Christian America? I don't think America realized what an amazing bulwark, having kind of a discursive and just kind of everywhere Christian influence, how much of a preserving element that was on our society. Not that I want to say that all of previous America was Christian. I mean, segregation is not Christian. The whole separate but equal malarkey, that was all a lie. And America of the 50s participated in that wholeheartedly. There was nothing Christian about separate bathrooms or separate drinking fountains. That was all America. And yet, I mean, doesn't it just feel that we're sliding into chaos? I was out of pocket this week, so I didn't hear about the shootings until I got back, all of them. The 2 men shot, and the 5 police officers shot. And as our world just seems to be becoming less and less a preserved place. I don't know that our country diagnoses it the way that I do, but I see Christianity being less and less embraced by our country. That our political leaders are beginning to see it less and less as really an essential part of American leadership. That holding Christian values, whether the leaders are Christian or not, of kindness and goodness and preserving virtue, those things are being forgotten. And we are inheriting this. Increasingly, if you want to be a serious Christian, it's kind of seen as a problem. You know, why do you hold those views about gender? Why do you hold those views about sexuality? Why do you hold those views about marriage and about relationship? Who are you to say those things? Who do you think you are? Who do you think you are not to participate in the world as it is? You don't get to decide whether you serve somebody or not. You don't get to do that. This is the America we live in. And it's giving birth to hatred and violence and distrust and all kinds of a mess. Because there was a time, even though America was not entirely whole, Christianity had some say in how we lived. And increasingly, that is fading. How then shall we live? If we are Christians in this culture, how do we live? Increasingly, the ending of the book of Acts is going to talk to us. Because as we live more and more in post-Christian America, we are going to have more and more in common with pre-Christian Paul. Paul lived in an empire that eventually would be Christianized to some degree or another. But he didn't live to see that. The entire time Paul lived, he lived in a world of unspeakable violence, of capricious laws, and of oppression and mistreatment. It was rising as Paul's life would come to its conclusion. And as we pass through the book of Acts, we see more and more what you and I may have to deal with more and more. And that is, how do we engage with the non-Christian world? How do we interact with a culture that has gone away from us? How did he interact with a culture that hadn't come to him yet? See how we're kind of lining up? That's why in some ways this passage in Acts 24 is kind of really more toward the America of now, and certainly the America of 10 years from now, than most of Acts. Because it's speaking to how do we live when we engage with the powers that be, when the powers that be are not us and have very little to do with what we think is important. When they can't even understand us. They don't know how we think or what we are. An awful lot of what Paul believes will frankly get him killed. Paul now stands not before some soldier in the provinces who doesn't know how to deal with him. He stands now before a Roman governor. That's exactly the office that Pontius Pilate held, by the way. Pilate, who had the power to execute Jesus Christ. He stands now before that kind of power. And that kind of, the machinery of this thing, the way that it works is that if you are a governor, you got to keep the people above you happy. And the way you keep the people above you happy is you keep the people below you doing their job, and you keep the taxes flowing up. Justice is defined by what keeps you in office. There is a certain level of precedent. The way things have been handled before is the way you need to handle them now. But our idea of protection under the law, equal protection under the law, that dude is the law. Okay, he decides how the Roman law system works and what's going to happen. Now, he can't kill Paul the way that Pilate killed Jesus, because he's a Roman citizen, and a Roman citizen can't be executed in the provinces. He'll have to go to Rome for that. But he can send him to Rome for execution. He can send him with that sentence on him. So Paul is now on trial for his life. And the machinery, he knows it's waking up. The Roman government, they don't know who they've got. If they knew who they had in Paul, then they would have accused him of insurrection. Because he believes in a king, not Caesar. He follows a king named Jesus. Frankly, if this Jewish lawyer were just slightly better at his job, and don't get me wrong, this is a slick lawyer that he's up against, but if the Jewish lawyer were just slightly better than his job and he wasn't so focused on the turmoil that happened in Jerusalem that got him arrested, he could have accused him of following King Jesus. Christ means king, by the way. You know that, right? So every time you say Jesus Christ or Christ Jesus, you're saying King Jesus. He follows a king, not Caesar. That'll get him killed. There are things that Paul believes that if he is clear about them, will get him into trouble. And it's the kind of trouble that will absolutely shut down and end his ministry. That will stop him from being able to be effective in this non-Christian world in which he is trying to engage. And so Paul is going to actually be very clear, very truthful, but also very veiled. You'll see it in when he gives his defense. He's not going to go much into King Jesus. He's not going to talk about him much. In fact, he doesn't mention him at all. This will stand in sharp contrast to what we'll see in a couple of weeks when we see him stand before a Jewish court and make his defense there when he talks to King Agrippa. But here, he's not talking to a Jew at all. And so he's showing us how to interact in a non-Christian world. Let's work our way through this. So beginning in chapter 24, verse 1, it says, After 5 days, the high priest Ananias came down with some elders and spokesmen, one Tertullus. This guy is a slick-tongued lawyer. They laid before the governor their case against Paul, and when he had been summoned, Tertullus began to accuse him, saying, now, I want you to notice how long it takes him to get to the point. Sometimes I think I take a while to get the point. Look at this. Since through you we enjoyed much peace, and since through your foresight, most excellent Felix, reforms are being made for this nation in every way and everywhere, we accept this with all gratitude. There's 50 words, and he has said nothing about the case he's there to try. Why is he doing that? Well, he's kissing up to the guy. And now listen to the thing that he lays out against Paul, because it's going to be just about as meaningful as the tripe he just threw out there. All right, so he says, but to detain you no further. I suspect Felix is like, okay, come on, get on with it. But to detain you no further, I beg your kindness to hear us briefly. I'm sorry, he wasn't finished kissing up. I was wrong. For we have found this man a plague. See, that's his legal argument. We hate this guy, so could you kill him, please? We have found this man a plague. You lay out your best charge first. That's the best you've got? Tertullius, maybe you should have gone deeper into the law firm, found somebody. We found this man a plague, one who stirs up riots among all the Jews throughout the world and is a ringleader of the sect of the Nazarenes. Now, if that were true, that actually would cause a problem. And certainly Paul finds himself again and again at the heart of a riot. They spring up around him. But it is a lie to say that he causes them. That's like saying he causes his cheek to get red every time we smack him. No. You're starting the riots. And you're blaming him because you get mad at him. And you, instead of reasoning with him, instead of arguing with him to overcome him, you folks start a riot everywhere he goes. His message is one of love and peace. Love and peace does not start a riot. That's not what's going on. So he's guilty of starting. It would be a big deal if he did that. The Romans would care a lot. It's not what he's doing. Throughout the world, and as a ringleader, he even tried to profane the temple. Again, that might be a big deal if it were true. But if it were true, it would have already been proven. This is what, his third trial? I mean, the first one's kind of informal, then there in the temple, and then he's before the Sanhedrin. If there was a Gentile person that he had brought into the temple, which was the charge, that person would have been found, produced, and held guilty, and he would have been held guilty, and they both would have been put to death. So it can't be true. It's a lie. This is the best that he's got. But we seized him. We did a good job. We caught him. Didn't catch the other guy, because there wasn't one. But we seized him, And by examining him yourself, you'll be able to find out from him about everything of which we accuse him. Can you imagine that happening in a court? Okay, so I'm doing my opening statement, and it's not going so well, so maybe the defense lawyer will do my job. That's the best he's got. It all sounds bad. There's no proof. He's offered zero evidence because there isn't any. Now, folks, it isn't fair. But don't think that just because someone throws lies at you or says things that aren't true, that it'll go well for you. In our post-Christian America, this is the kind of thing that we might start expecting to see. In fact, if you've been following the news, if you're a baker or a photographer, this kind of thing's already going on. Where assaults come at people and they define them as racists, and they define them as bigots, and they define them as all kinds of monsters. And that's tied up to our Christian faith now. Such that out there in the world, our reputation is of haters and bigots. Now, it doesn't do us any favors when we behave the way that the accusers accuse us of. I mean, folks, we must not be bigots. We're not allowed to be haters. We follow King Jesus, and King Jesus tells us to love everybody. And when they accuse us, let their accusations ring false. Let them tell lies about us, because we don't need to behave in such a way that they can tell the truth and accuse us successfully. But what does Paul do with all of this? Well, he blows it up. Now you'll note that he starts with respect as well. It says the Jews also joined in charging and affirming that these things were so. So they're going, yeah, it's all true. None of it is. And then the governor nodded to him to speak. Paul replied, and you'll note he begins with respect. Knowing that for many years you have been judge over this nation, I cheerfully make my defense. Notice how little kissing up there is there. He says, I respect your office, and I'm happy to have a chance to talk to you about this. And that's it. The Christian shows respect to the non-Christian world. Why? Because they're people. Christians behave like that. They do respectful, good things. They're kind, they're honest, they're good. He's behaving himself well. And so he makes his defense. You can verify that it was not more than 12 days since I went up to worship in Jerusalem, and they find me disputing with anyone or stirring up a crowd, either in the temple or in the synagogue or in the city. He says, they can't prove what I did because I didn't do it. I came into the town and they didn't find me engaged in argument with anybody because I wasn't doing that. I wasn't there to cause problems because that's not the kind of person I am. As a follower of King Jesus, I am a person of peace. I live at peace with everyone, and I make it my duty to be kind and good to everyone. So I went to temple. I didn't fight there. I went to synagogue. I didn't fight there. I was walking through the city for 7 days. I didn't fight there. They arrested me 12 days ago, and I've been in prison for 12 days. For nothing. Again, in post-Christian America, don't be surprised if that starts happening. It seems beyond belief that a Christian might go to jail in America for being a Christian. Well, in 2016, that might actually be the case. Let's talk again in 2020 or 2024. I mean, America may change course, but if we stay on this one, 2035, there might be a lot of us in jail for being Christians. Could be. I don't mean to sound crazy, conspiracy theorists. I'm not trying to. I'm just telling you, this kind of world is not unheard of. So he says, I didn't do any of those things, and neither can they prove what they now bring against me. They can all say it, but they can't offer a bit of evidence. They can't bring you the name of the Gentile that I brought to the temple because I didn't bring a Gentile to the temple. Was I in the city with a Gentile? Yes. I brought people from the Gentile churches. We came into the town. I was there, but they can't prove that I defiled the temple because I would never do that. That isn't who I am. So they can't prove what they say now, but this I confess. You want to know what trouble I do? Here's what I confess. That according to the way that they call a sect, I worship the God of our fathers, believing everything laid down in the law and written in the prophets, having a hope in God which these men themselves accept, that there will be a resurrection of both the just and the unjust. I told you earlier that he was dealing with a non-Christian audience, and he's kind of veiled in what he says. Do you hear how Jewish that sounds? He's saying, I'm a good Jew. Good Christians are good Jews. You know that, right? We think of ourselves as a completely different religion. We are engrafted into the family of Abraham. We are Israel. We are good Jews if we follow Messiah Jesus. Because remember whose Messiah he is? Whose family was he born into? We are part of Israel. In fact, we are true Israel. True Israel follows Israel's Messiah. And we believe everything written down in the law, don't we? I mean, I don't offer animal sacrifice because I have the sacrifice of the Christ. There have been a lot of things that He said, okay, you don't keep doing this. But is there one thing I don't learn from there? The law tells me so much about God. I believe everything in the law. I know God because of the law. I recognize Messiah Jesus because He fulfills the law and He fills it up in me. He brings about the ethical standards of the law to life in us. I believe everything in the law. We obey the law because of Jesus. And then I believe everything in the prophets who looked forward to Him and called Him to us. He's saying, this is who I am. As a follower of the way. What is the way? The way is Jesus. I am the way, the truth, and the life. And He says, if I'm following the way, the one who brings me to life, the one who brings about life in me, and I do it consistently with the faith that I received at my birth. I've always been this, but the way came to me and taught me to understand it correctly. And so they call it a sect because they don't get it. But I get it, and I'm following it. And the real hope is the one that they share. You know, resurrection was not a new idea when Christianity came on the scene. You remember at Lazarus' funeral, Jesus said, your brother will rise again. And she didn't say, what? That's amazing, really? She said, I know he will rise again in the resurrection in the last day. She already believed it. Jesus' resurrection hadn't happened yet, but she already believed in the resurrection because Jews did. Largely the exile is where that belief came to be, because a whole lot of people got carried off into exile and they died there. A whole lot of people, and remember the promises of God. You'll have a land. You'll have lots of people, and you'll be a blessing to all the families of the earth. Well, here these people died. Not much blessing going on there. They died oppressed and sad. And how many times has Judaism been oppressed and sad? Over and over and over. And so the Jews of just a couple centuries before the first century had started wrestling with the reality of how can God keep His promises if these people died outside of them? And they decided, well, they have to come back. They have to. Because otherwise God's promises are null and void for these people. And so they must come back to life. It's the dead, they'll be blessed. But they can't be blessed as disembodied spirits. They weren't offered those promises as disembodied spirits. They're going to be flesh and bone. The body that goes into the ground comes out. So the resurrection is an event of the body. Jesus didn't put His body in the earth and get a different one. What went into the ground came out of the ground. His tomb was left empty because that's what resurrection is. It is and now, it came out different. You know, and there's no tempting Him anymore. He's beyond all that. He has a spiritual body, but instead of a fleshly body. But those words in like 1 Corinthians, those are adjectives. And it's not meant to say, well, He used to have a body made out of flesh, and now He has a body made out... No, it's the same body. It's just changed in its nature. So that instead of being under the curse and messed up with sinful flesh and all that, now it's a resurrected body. It's why He can show up someplace and people can't recognize Him, but He can still eat fish. What happened to Jesus, Paul is saying, is going to happen to everybody. He says that the just and the unjust, everybody, and not just everybody, everybody is going to come back. We're all going to be resurrected. And if we're alive when the Lord comes back, we're all going to be changed. When He had to boil Christianity down, He said, it is Judaism with this hope. And the reason that He has this hope is because He's already seen it. He stood in the presence of the resurrection. He stood there and he's seen Jesus face to face. It blinded him the first time. It was so brilliant, it left him without his eyesight. But then he's also been caught up into the third heaven. He didn't know whether that was just a vision or something where he picked up and got carried there. He has seen Jesus. He's been with the resurrected Lord. He's talked to him. He's had it all explained by him. And so he knows, he doesn't just hope, he knows the resurrection is real. And he looks at Israel, at these people who are accusing him, and he says, you share the hope I have. I just have it a whole lot more than you do. I know it's true that the dead will be raised. And folks, this is the hope that we hold on to in post-Christian America. We don't live in a hope that things will go well for us. We don't live hoping that our lives are nice, that the boundary markers fall in pleasant places, that we'll never have trouble or sorrow, that we won't ever be mistreated by our fellow man, that we won't ever be treated with prejudice or lies or hate or any of the mess that's out here in this world. That's not our hope. Our hope is God. And that we should live our lives with God in this broken world, no matter what happens. That we should live with the law and the prophets and the New Testament guiding us to be living well and right. Not rich well, but rich in love and in mercy and being the kind of people that we should be no matter how they treat us. And our deeper hope is the resurrection of the dead. That should we die before He returns, our bodies will stay in the ground until He comes back, and they will come back out of the ground. That's the central Christian hope. The resurrection of everybody. And that we will then stand with the just and the unjust before the Lord Jesus Christ, and He will keep God's promises. That the blessings will be there. That's what Paul is saying. So I have this hope. And he finishes off his this brilliant ending to his defense. He says, so I always take pains to have a clear conscience toward both God and man. Because I have that hope, because I believe those truths, I try to live this way. I try to be this kind of person. Not the kind of person who stirs up riots and trouble and fights and bitterness and anger, and I'm not filled with hate and murder and lies and lust and all that mess. That's not the kind of life I'm trying to live. The kind of life I'm trying to live is one where I have a clear conscience. Because Jesus Christ has forgiven what's bad in me, and I'm trying not to put any more in. I'm working to live without regret, following the Lord, because I never regret what I do when I follow the Lord. So I live with a clear conscience before both God and man. Now, after several years, I came bringing alms to my nation to present offerings. And while I was doing this, they found me purified in the temple without any crowd or tumult. He says, far from trying to start riots, I was trying to feed hungry people. Instead of doing wicked things, I was trying to do good things. You've looked at me wrongly if you think I'm a bad man. You know, I'm trying to give alms. Don't know whether he actually succeeded in it or not. That's what he was trying to do. And then he says, but some Jews from Asia, and that means he recognized them. That's the first time we've gotten that detail. When he was in the temple, the people who started shouting were people maybe from some of the synagogues that he's been preaching in out in Asia. He recognizes them as people that rejected him, maybe drove him out of town. Maybe they started a riot, the thing they're accusing him of. Some Jews from Asia, now they ought to be here before you to make an accusation should they have anything against me. See, that's the way the Roman law courts worked. They didn't have a police force that went and arrested you when you did something wrong. Instead, your fellow citizens dragged you before the judge and said, this person murdered my brother. You didn't have cops out there. They had soldiers. They didn't have a police force. That concept wasn't even in their head. So if you were standing in court, the people who accuse you have to be there, or the whole court proceedings are invalid. So what he's done is he's done his defense, and then he's pointed out, by the way, this Tertullus, he wasn't there. He has no right to talk about me. Those people ought to be there. And as far as he's concerned, that's the end of it. And it ought to be the end of it for Felix, too. And that should just bring an end to the whole court proceedings. He says, they ought to be before you, or else let these men themselves say what wrongdoing they have found. If they saw me do it, let them tell about it. When I stood before other than when I stood before the council, I cried out, standing among them, it is with respect to the resurrection of the dead that I'm on trial for you today. You see how he came back to that again? At the center of our faith, folks, is this hope. That in this life, we may or may not get blessing. We might run into trouble. We live in a world that's prone to bring trouble upon us. This life isn't all there is. In fact, this life isn't most of what there is. You're going to be a resurrected person a whole lot longer than you're going to be a pre-resurrected person. You're going to have that resurrection body much longer than this one. This one transformed into that. That's what you're going to have for eternity. He says this is what it's all about. He's putting all of that, he's saying this is how I respond to a world that's not willing to listen. I've got a lot that I could say about marriage. I'm not going to go into it before you, Felix, because you don't want to hear that. I've got a lot that I could say about purity. I'm not going to go into that. I have a lot that I could say about anger or lust or forgiveness. I have a lot that I could say about Jesus. Oh, so much that I could say. But you're not willing to hear it. So I won't go into that right now. All I'm going to do is demonstrate to you that I am not the person you think I am. In the world that's around us right now, that is one of our biggest jobs. Everywhere you go, you wear the name Christian. If you are a Christian, then Christ's reputation is tied up with you. And the world right now hears that name Christian and thinks of it with some level of disgust. So much of our world has turned Christianity into something it is not. Be the truth. Let the hope that is in you drive you toward goodness. Let the things that you long for lead you to love even a world that hates you. Because for far too much of Christianity, as the world turns against us, our response is exactly like the world, and we hate them right back, maybe even more so. And we talk about them with disgust and with loathing, and we gather into our little cliques and are scandalized. Folks, that is not Paul. That is not Jesus. That is not God. God so loved the world that He gave Jesus. Now, you don't have to give Him everything. Jesus once said, don't give to dogs what is sacred, or cast your pearls before swine. And there are times for a veiled defense where you don't show them everything that you believe. But you ought to let them see everything that you are. Let them see your kindness and your goodness, and let their accusations fall flat, because you are too good of a person for any of that to ring true. You're too good of a person because you follow Jesus Christ, and He has made you what you are. It may be that you look into your life right now and you're feeling oppressed, you're feeling persecuted, mistreated by somebody, and you need the prayers of the church to help you live faithfully in the midst of that. And if that's the case, let us know. We want to pray for you. It may be that you came to this place and you were suffering, you were hurting when you walked through those doors. Well, don't carry your pain with you, with it behind your teeth. Let us know. We want to pray for you. And if you're not a Christian, folks, there's no better way of life, none, than following Jesus Christ. And if you'd like to begin to do that today, there's water right here. We'd love to talk to you about why. If this morning you're subject to the invitation of God, why don't you come right now while we stand and sing. Christ alone, my hope is found.